Welcome back to Mastering Typography and Text-Based Design with me, Jess Goldsmith. On this episode, I'm going to share my techniques on how I create sticker-like pieces like these on Adobe Illustrator. We'll be gaining an understanding of the compound path tool as discussed in episode 2, the blend tool, the offset tool, and some more tips. I think the best way for me to be able to teach you how to create something like this is to reverse engineer it. So let's take a closer look at this piece. Episode 3, create a sticker design with typography skills. First, you can see that the text, the letters, have a gradient on it. A gradient cannot be applied to live text, so we already know that the text is not live and the font has been outlined. Here's what happens when I try to apply a gradient to live text. Womp womp, it doesn't work. To outline your font, select the text, right-click and hit Outline Text. Or you can use the shortcut Command-Shift-O on your keyboard. Now that the text is outlined, you can apply a gradient. Head to the bottom of your tool panel, right under your selected color. The small middle box is where you can add and adjust your gradient. Or you can hit the greater than forward arrow key on your keyboard. You can adjust the colors, the spacing between, add colors, remove colors. To apply your gradient to the entire selected asset, head back over to the toolbar, click the gradient button, and then click and drag your mouse across the entire selected asset. Now go ahead and add a stroke to your text. Yes, this is something that you can do with live text, but we had to add a gradient anyway. Now we're going to apply an envelope distort, but it's going to be a custom shape. In episode 2, we used a circle or any other primitive shape, and now we're going to create our own. Start by drawing out any shape with your pencil tool. I recommend something relatively simple to start off with, and then you can adjust your points as needed. Once again, follow the same instructions for envelope distort in episode 2. Here's another way that you can customize your envelope distort by using a primitive shape in a really simple way. I'm using a rectangle this time, and then I'm going to add some points and create some simple curves. You can really make an envelope distort with any shape, but you want to make sure that it's legible. Now that our text is distorted, I want to take a look at what's going on here. The text is being distorted, but it isn't fully distorted. The best way for me to describe this is that it's still having a filter of the distortion on top of it. But to simplify your file, you should always be expanding your distortion. Before that, make a copy of the asset that you have before you expand it. Expanding the distortion or expanding your shape really just means that you are taking any filter, and instead of having it applied to the shape, that is the full property of what the shape has become. So now when you hover over, you don't see the original text in a straight line. The shape itself is the distortion. It now exists as the distorted shape. Now I get to teach you the blend tool, one of my absolute favorite tools to use in Adobe Illustrator ever. The blend tool is used to transition from one object to another. These transitions can include color, stroke, shape, and other applied properties. Let me show you a few examples of what the blend tool can do with typography. You see this blended transition from the front to the back/bottom of the text. Here's how you're going to do it. It's pretty simple. Create a copy of your text and make sure it's on a layer below the original. You could really place this anywhere and at any angle. I tend to do this a little bit lower and to the left, or any variation of that on the XY axis. Select both objects and hit Object in the top drop-down menu and go to Blend Mate. So this is what happens, and it's super cool. Your Illustrator program might have other settings going on, so let me tell you how to adjust and fix it in real time. While your text is still selected, go back to Object, Blend, and hit Blend Options this time. Make sure that you have the preview toggled on. Here you see options for specified steps, and you can adjust those to have more steps in between the front and the back. You could do specified distance, which does the same thing, but it's measuring the distance instead of the steps. You can also choose smooth color, which sandwiches a blended piece between the front and the back. If you decide that you no longer want to have a blend on your text, you can simply go to Object, Blend, Release. While your text is still blended, you could play around with the top and bottom layers with sizing and angles to give it some dimension and really cool effects. You can also play around with the thickness and colors of the stroke. Play around and see how you can make different effects and have these colors work together for your benefit. Okay, this next step, a lot of people might find controversial, but it's part of my personal workflow. It's been working for me great, and I want to share it with you. We're going to yet again use the expand tool. Make sure that your full blended text is selected and then hit expand. A little dialog box is going to come up. Just hit OK. Do not forget to make a copy of your blended text. Now you can see that all of these instances are their own shapes. Make sure everything is highlighted. It should be because they're grouped together. And then go to the Pathfinder tool. Once you get to the Pathfinder tool, hit the Unite button. It's the one all the way on the top left. This is going to turn all of these shapes into one shape. Now, the reason that some people might find this method controversial is because it creates a lot of points. And a lot of times, many points will slow down your program. No fear, there's a fix to that. Hold down on the Direct Selection tool and grab the Lasso tool. Find the instances where there are just too many shapes, circle them, and delete them. Now you can reconnect the path and close it to make it a full shape again. You don't have to do this if you're not creating a bunch of instances that are going to make a million points, but it's good to know that you have the option to go through this workflow if it comes up. To really get that sticker effect, we're going to want to add that white border around the entire design. We're going to use this by using the offset path tool. Now that you have this united shape, select it, object, path, and offset path. Here you can adjust the amount that the path is offset over the original stroke, and you have the options for the corners to be round, mitered, or beveled. My personal favorite is to use round, but any work. You can now delete the top object, meaning the original shape that you just offset, or you can combine them together using the Pathfinder tool. Either way works just the same. Now go ahead and grab the copy of your blended shapes that you put to the side earlier. Bring that to the top layer and align the two shapes, and woo, we have that sticker looking design. You can use these tools the same way using different settings to create different end results. I'm gonna run through those now. Here you can see I'm changing the color to solid, and I'm following the same exact steps, but the distance between the two pieces of text is smaller and there are more instances. So it's giving a really cool looking hard shadow. I'm using the same technique for the outer white rim. Here I'm using the same technique, but I'm making the bottom text smaller, giving it more dimension and making it look like it's popping out in a little bit of a 3D way. This one's pretty cool. I'm ungrouping Create and Everyday so that there are two separate groups. And then I'm following the same steps, except I'm moving the back text from each object in opposite directions, giving it some really cool dynamic movement. And of course, at the end, I'm adding the white border around all of them. I think it's so cool that you can use the same technique in slightly different variations to create new pieces over and over again. By the way, don't think I forgot about teaching you all about compound paths. In the context of what we're learning, compound paths fall into the category of clipping masks. You can think of a clipping mask as a way to create a frame around a color, a shape, a pattern, a photo, whatever. But let me explain it more in depth. Compound path is a path that contains two or more paths. It's basically combining two paths together for Adobe Illustrator to read it as one. If you're trying to apply a clipping mask with your outline text, it won't work initially. This is because it's not a compound path, and Illustrator is only reading one of those paths. You can create a compound path by selecting your text, go to Object, scroll down to Compound Path, and then hit Make. Depending on your program settings, it might look like the text disappeared, but don't worry, it didn't. You can just highlight it again and add a stroke so you can see it. Now follow the same steps that you would do for a clipping mask, and there you go, compound path as a clipping mask. Okay, that's a wrap on episode 3. Thank you so much for joining me again. Stay tuned for episode 4 and make sure to follow me at Chick of All Trade or at Women of Type. I'm Jess Goldsmith and I'm so happy that you're here.